We love talking Ohio State football here at Mark Rogers TV, as we do each and every Wednesday night, with Brandon Zimmerman from the ozone.net. Please join him there. He's written some great stuff just here in the last week, as he has jumped on board with the fine folks there that do an exceptional job covering the Buckeyes. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me again.
Definitely. Look forward to this. We're getting close. Let's talk about the offensive line under much scrutiny. Urban Meyer made the comment at some point, I think it was early in the spring session, that I look at the 9 positional units. 7 I thought performed well as I reviewed 2016. 2 did not. I don't know that he named them, but I think most Buckeye fans filled in wide receiver and offensive line. We don't know, and we're not going to know until they line up in week 1 and specifically against Oklahoma in week 2 if strides have been made. But I'll start out with this. Billy Price obviously has to make the same move that Pat Elflein did the season before. We know he's a tremendous guard. He's got to make the move to center. Just your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think Billy Price at the center spot is going to be a pretty safe move for him. He's very strong, very smart. I think Billy Price will come out of this season as one of the top centers in the nation, whereas if he stuck around at guard, he was very good. He was first team All-American last year. But I think once you slide him over into that center role, he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 centers in all of college football. So Billy Price moving over. This is his 4th year starting. Obviously, you want your most experienced guy there at the center spot. And Billy Price is that. So I think it'll be a successful move for him. And this allows the only open offensive line spot to go to that right guard spot and create some competition there where there's, some really highly rated guys coming out of high school that are fighting for that one open spot. So I think Billy Price moving to center is going to be a good thing.
Jamarco Jones coming into his senior campaign at left tackle seemed to be pretty solid last year. Most of the ire was directed toward Michael Jordan and Isaiah Prince. Just your thoughts about those 3, since we know that they're entrenched, they're coming back. What's the confidence level?
So I think Jamarco Jones out at left tackle is pretty solid. I don't think there's really too much concern with him out there. Last year was second team All Big Ten. So, there were times where he might have struggled a little bit, but I think for the most part, if you look at the whole season, Jones was pretty solid for the whole season. The other 2 guys were where there were a little bit of concern. Not so much with Michael Jordan, who was starting last year as a true freshman, which is just crazy to do on a offensive line that is as talented and as deep as the Buckeyes is. Michael Jordan just came in from the get-go and kind of took charge of that left guard spot. Was freshman All-American last year. So there were times where he looked like a freshman, but I think this year, he's also going to be a very solid person. I think with Jones, Jordan, and Price anchoring that left-hand side of the line, it's going to be pretty darn strong there. And I think Mike Weber's going to have a lot of holes running through that side of the line. You get over to the right side, and you have a little more questioning going on. Isaiah Prince is going into his 2nd year as the starter out at right tackle. I think it's kind of safe to say that, rock bottom for Prince was that Penn State game when he gave up 14 hurries, which was the most that was ever recorded for a offensive lineman during a game. And really the whole offensive line kind of hit rock bottom during that Penn State game. But Prince was the one that was kind of singled out. As the season went on, he started to get better. I thought against Clemson, when he had that month off, between Michigan and the Clemson game, I thought Prince actually played pretty good. I thought Wilkins was just going to dominate him that game, and that was going to be the reason why the Buckeyes really struggled on the offense. Turns out the whole offense just kind of struggled because they just were kind of outmatched and outcoached. So, but I thought Prince played pretty good going into his second year. I think he should make those strides going forward. But the right side definitely is going to be the one to really watch going into fall ball there.
You got to be a pretty hardcore fan to pay attention to the offensive line, the names, the abilities of these players. You got no stats to go by, basically. You've got to go by watching the games yourselves if you're that into it, or the scouting reports and what guys like us and media have to say about the players. I think one knock comes against offensive linemen and the offensive line units for any team without the understanding that it's impossible, especially in this day and age, with the exotic schemes that are put together by defensive coordinators and the sheer speed and talent on the edge by most of these upper echelon teams, that you're not going to dominate a defense. You need special players on offense that can make plays. You need a quarterback that can make plays. Yeah, you don't expect your quarterback to be ambushed, as we saw, especially in the fourth quarter and in the second half against Penn State. That was especially against a defense where we thought they had a really good defensive line that moved on to the NFL the previous season, and it was not heralded at that point. And to be making plays, that was alarming. There's no question. But against Michigan, against Clemson, I'm not saying that they played well, but I think people at times, fans, expect too much and too clean of a pocket and huge running lanes and just to have that push all the time. I think, yeah, the Penn State game was alarming in the second half. Northwestern to a degree, considering the talent disparity and what you would expect to be able to do against a solid unit, but not a top 10 unit or a top 5 unit like a Michigan or Clemson. And that's where it was difficult to watch.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of should give Buckeye fans a little bit of relaxation going into this year. Was, against Michigan, against Clemson, they really did not play that bad as a whole. So I think, like I said, they hit their rock bottom, but I think they kind of came together a little bit down the stretch. It wasn't perfect ball. It wasn't the best line that we've seen with the Buckeyes here in the most recent years. But I think it was good building blocks for them to come into this season and actually become a pretty dominant offensive line. The big key, though, is just going to find out who fills into that right guard spot and if they're able to step in and get up to the level that the rest of the offensive line is at.
Yeah, Brandon. So they get the two elite guards, Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis, out of California and Ohio, rated number 1 and number 2 in the nation. Do you think those guys get possible playing time? Anybody else in the mix?
I think the front runners definitely have to be the upperclassmen. So you've got really 3 guys that are kind of the front runners, I guess you could assume. First one you got is Matt Burrell, who's a redshirt sophomore. He was a number 4, or he was a 4-star, the number 7 guard coming out of the 2015 class. So he's one that could really play into that. You got Malcolm Pridgeon, who was a JUCO transfer last year, was supposed to really compete with Isaiah Prince for that right tackle spot last year, but got injured during fall camp, missed the entire season. So he worked a lot at right guard during spring ball. Really played there most of the time during the spring game. And then the third one really that's in the mix is Demetrius Knox, who is a junior, who is the number 5 guard coming out in the 2014 class. So all 3 of them are kind of neck and neck. Then you add in the freshman Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis, and I think one of those 5 are going to come out with that right guard spot. As far as who's it going to be, I really am not too sure right now. If I had to put a name to it, I would go with Pridgeon out there at right guard. But I mean, it's one of those things where everything that you read from spring practice, it's just all neck and neck. And whereas like last year coming out of spring, we kind of knew that Michael Jordan was going to be that left guard. Everyone kind of thought it might just be lip service last year because true freshmen usually just don't come in and start. This year, there really wasn't anything like that, where there was even the coaching staff letting on one way or the other. So right now, I would guess Malcolm Pridgeon, but I mean, Matt Burrell and Demetrius Knox are very much right in the mix, and it's all going to come down to who has the better fall camp.
We talk Ohio State football each and every Wednesday night with Brandon Zimmerman from the ozone.net. Join him there. Definitely. It's also bzimmerman9 on Twitter. All right. We talk Ohio State football, but by extension, we go Big Ten. And Brandon wrote an article this week listing his top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And I would consider this to be, and this is just not doing much research on it at all, but thinking back over the last 5 to 10 years, that it's been kind of a down position in the Big Ten. And one of the issues with the Big Ten up until the last few years when the league has risen and challenged the elite. But there was a time there where the quarterback play wasn't real deep compared to some other leagues, specifically the Pac-12 and the ACC have been really good at times. But we've got a cast of characters that aren't great, but I think we've got 5 pretty proven guys, and then beyond that, a lot of speculation. Wes Lunt from Illinois moves on. He had a decent career with the Illini. Armstrong with Nebraska, Tommy Armstrong, spotty career, not really a quarterback, kind of a running back at quarterback, but made a lot of plays, threw a lot of picks. He's gone. Matt Leidner, for as much as he appeared to be not necessarily a dynamic player, actually getting some play in NFL camps as he was selected and could find himself in the league for a while. And Jake Rudock from Iowa was a really good player, beat up in the bowl game against Florida, but finished off his career with a win against Michigan late in the season. So going into 2017, Brandon, who do you like?
So my top, as you mentioned, I think the Big Ten with the quarterbacks right now, and I think it's really a lot of conferences are kind of set up like this, where I feel like they've got a few really good college quarterbacks that probably won't be very good pros. It's just the kind of style that the Big Ten's running right now. I don't think you've got very many guys that'll be NFL starters someday. As far as top 5 quarterbacks, Big Ten this year going into the season, number 1, I've got JT Barrett. I know like there is nobody that has more controversy surrounding his starting job than JT Barrett. But when you think about like what he's done, he's had such a great career for the Buckeyes that even if he would have left this year, he would go down as stats-wise one of the best quarterbacks to ever play at Ohio State. For him to come back for another year, that is just really good for him. Last year combined for 3,400 yards, 33 touchdowns. For his career, he's at 100 touchdowns, over 9,000 yards. I think he's 24-6 for his career with the Buckeyes, and that's starting kind of 2.5 years or so. Last year, he was Silver Football co-winner with Saquon Barkley. He was the Big Ten quarterback of the year last year, his second time winning the award. So while JT Barrett struggled really bad down the stretch last year, I think going into this year, he still has to be considered that top quarterback for the Big Ten. But there are definitely some guys that are kind of nipping at his heel for that number 1 spot.
Hey, Brandon, before I let you finish 2 through 5, a couple quick things here. So one would be, and we talked about this before we came on, but I find it interesting how people build lists, and fans love top 5, top 10 lists, and that's one of the reasons why we do them. So my prime example is the Tom Brady example. Tom Brady, I believe, is the best or the second best quarterback in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers being the other. So if you take Tom Brady and throw him on the worst offense in the NFL, his stats are going to suffer immensely. Is he going to lift up that offense? Yes, but he's going to suffer. Is he still, in my eyes, the best or second best quarterback in the NFL? Yes, and I would try to be able to weed through that and be able to see that still. But some people rate these players based on supporting cast and the help that they're given to accumulate stats to justify the season. So the best quarterback may not supply the best stats. The fifth best quarterback might have great wide receivers and a great line and produce the best numbers. So I'm just getting your thoughts. Is this a list in terms of who you purely think are the 5 best quarterbacks 1 through 5, or are somewhat supported by other units that will enable them to produce the 5 best seasons?
I think with mine, it's really who I consider the 5 best, the best quarterbacks going into the season, regardless, like you said, where they are playing at. JT Barrett's a prime example of that, where if you look just purely stats wise, JT Barrett's far from, the best stats quarterback in the Big Ten. What sets JT Barrett apart is, his leadership skills, his proven ability to provide a big play in clutch situations. So I think about stats some. Stats play a role in it, but having the most passing yards, having the most touchdowns does not automatically make you the best quarterback in my mind. Otherwise, you're going to have guys like Richard Legal and David Blau up there ranked 1 or 2 because they throw the ball 600 times a season, where someone like JT Barrett's only throwing about 350 or so. So I think you really, when you make up these lists, you've got to come up with a good balance between stats and actually watching the players play games and spending time on Saturday to watch them throw, and look at some of the guys and see how much their supporting cast does kind of inflate their stats, and how much of it is just, they are really good quarterbacks.
Okay, so let's go with number 2, and you can carry us on through the rest of the 5.
So number 2 was a hard one for me. I threw Trace McSorley here. He's on a lot of people's preseason Heisman lists. He's on, a lot of first team All Big Tens. Stats wise, Trace McSorley had a great year last year. He combined for 3,976 yards, 36 touchdowns. He's one of those guys where, stats don't always tell the whole story. I know, I watched a lot of Penn State games last year, and I really think that Penn State last year was set up for a guy like McSorley. They had Chris Godwin, who's one of those wide receivers that are able to go up and get almost every 50-50 ball, which is hard to come by. The Buckeyes had that a few years ago with Devin Smith. Last year, Trace McSorley kind of had that with Chris Godwin. And if you watch McSorley play, a lot of his throws downfield were kind of 50-50 balls. It seemed like most of his throws, he was just kind of chucking up there. It worked for him. I really don't think he has that support this year to do the same thing. So he's going to have to make giant strides to kind of be more deliberate with his throws. I think McSorley is going to have a very good year. I think Penn State's going to have a pretty good team. But I think it would be pretty unrealistic for anyone to really think that McSorley is going to put up almost 4,000 yards again, almost 40 touchdowns. But I threw him into that second spot because I just really couldn't justify anyone else. It kind of shows for the lack of the really high-end depth of the Big Ten that I really don't have too many nice things to say about Trace McSorley as a quarterback. He's fun to watch. I mean, he was fun to watch last year, except for when he beat the Buckeyes. But
come on, Brandon, you don't like the home run call? You don't like
no. But
watch it go.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting to see what he does this year. But there was really nobody that I could justify sliding into that spot. My number 3 guy came close. Big fan of his. He's not really a name that many people around the nation will know. He plays for a smaller school. It's not really known for football. Well, small for Big Ten standards. But the next guy is Clayton Thorson. Um, I forced myself to watch Northwestern games last year a few times. They're not exactly the most fun team to watch. They had some exciting guys last year, like Austin Carr and Justin Jackson, going in there with Clayton Thorson. So the offense was fun at times. They're just very, it's one of the basic type of offenses that the Big Ten has. Thorson went on to throw for over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 9 picks. So, Thorson, I think, is primed to kind of get more national exposure this year as a junior. He was a sophomore last year, had a great season and a pretty good conference last year. I think as a junior, Thorson's going to have a really good season. He loses Austin Carr, which is going to hurt. I think Austin Carr caught something like 115 passes last year. So, but they do have Justin Jackson back. They got Garrett Dickerson coming back in the split back role. So he's going to have the weapons on the offensive side of the ball to help him. But they're really going to have to find someone to take up Austin Carr's spot there. Number 4 went with guy that, from reading around on Twitter and reading, I feel like I'm a lot higher on him than maybe other people are. I guess I'm supposed to hate him because he plays for Michigan, but Wilton Speight is coming in at number 4 on my list. Last year threw for over 2,500 yards and 19 touchdowns. I feel like Wilton Speight showed a lot of potential last year to make a big step this year into, jumping up pretty high on this list. I was really impressed with his game against the Buckeyes last year, where he had the shoulder injury. The Buckeye defense just kept on nailing him play after play. Still was able to stand in the pocket and deliver some pretty good throws. He looked a lot better than JT Barrett throwing the ball on that day from somebody sitting right there in the stands. His timing, his trust of his wide receivers were just perfect. He was throwing the ball before the wide receivers were coming out of their routes. Big thing with Wilton Speight that he needs to work on this year is his consistency. As good as he looked like against the Buckeyes, he would have a really bad game. And really, if you're looking at it just stats-wise, his final 3 of his final 4 games, he just really struggled, where like in those 3 games, he only combined for 400-something yards passing and 4 picks. So Wilton Speight, I think with another year under Harbaugh, who I guess I'm supposed to hate too, but he's a good quarterback coach, I think Speight has the potential to have a pretty good season this year. But just kind of like McSorley, big thing with Speight is he lost a lot of talent last year with Darbo, with Jake Butt. They just lost so much talent that he was throwing to last year, where this year a lot of those freshmen are going to have to really step up. Tony Girdman, a guy that writes for our site, wrote an article on Monday talking about this, where Michigan had 4 top-rated recruits that came in this year, obviously headlined by Donovan Peoples-Jones, who everyone knows, 5-star guy. But all 4 are like 6'4". If they can step up and provide Wilton Speight with just some sort of consistency out there at wide receiver, the ability to make plays, I think Speight could have a really big year. But he's just going to have to replace those guys from last year. But I was just impressed with how he played down the stretch, battling the shoulder injury and still being able to focus on those wide receivers. Number 5 was a tough spot for me because as I kind of mentioned on one of the comments, was there's about 3 or 4 people here that are kind of like equally average. So it was kind of a tough decision on who I got in there. This is one of those situations where you really had to look at how good the quarterback is moving forward and how you think he will make strides going into this season. So at number 5, I put David Blau out of Purdue. He was a 3-star guy. Last year, threw for 3,300 plus yards and 29 touchdowns. Big thing with him was he threw 21 picks last year, which is just downright horrible. Led the Big Ten in picks. Really, the only guy close to him was Richard Legal, who I think I threw 15 picks. Everyone else that started last year for the Big Ten was kind of 10 and under. So Blau showed a lot of potential last year, and a lot of those picks came really in about 3 games where against Cincinnati in week 2, he threw 5 picks, and then over his final 3 games, he threw 8 combined picks. So really those 4 games, if you look at it, that's what 13 picks right there. So I think with Jeff Brom coming in as the head coach there, that I think he will kind of help Blah kind of cut down on those picks. And I think he's going to make some pretty good strides going forward this year. And we will see some pretty impressive numbers from him, not only because Purdue throws the ball a lot more than most teams do, but because I think he's actually going to take a step forward and kind of be that pro style of quarterback that Purdue likes and that the Big Ten really doesn't have too much of.
All right, Brandon, I love the list, and this is how much I love it. As we discussed a few minutes ago, I saw your release on Twitter. I thought, okay, before I look at the article, I want to list my top 5 and compare it because we'll talk about it tonight. And I thought I would catch you on the Clayton Thorson versus Wilton Speight deal. And I thought, well, Michigan quarterback, he's going to take Speight 3 and drop Thorson because his numbers aren't that overwhelming. He'll drop him to 4, and that's where we're going to have our disagreement. But I was wrong because I've got Clayton Thorson at 3, as you do as well, and I've got the exact same top 5. So I'm not going to bore everyone with the full analysis of the top 5. Few things that jump out at me. You mentioned David Blau's struggles throwing interceptions, but Jeff Brom coming to Purdue should be a great aid to him. I completely agree there. Blau actually led the nation in interceptions with 21, and Richard Legault was second in the nation with 17, tied with a guy who I think made his mark on college football. If I remember, I don't know how. Deshaun Watson had 17 as well. He also made some plays positively. But David Blau, top 25 pro-style quarterback out of Texas. We'll see what he has this year. Also threw the 25 touchdowns. And you would really need to break down the Purdue tape to say, okay, 21 picks. Was he falling on his back half the time because the line couldn't hold it, or did 6 of them go through somebody's hands? Again, who's watching Purdue play? Wilton Speight, I got him at number 4. You went through the whole deal as I was looking to do with the left shoulder injury really hurting him down the stretch. He fought through it. He actually throws. Many people think that he throws better on the run than he does from the pocket. But he loses, the guys that you mentioned, along with Jehu Chesson. So he loses a lot of weapons there. But you, like me, are just rating these guys on, I think these are the 5 best, regardless of what the weapons look like. Clayton Thorson went from a freshman who led Northwestern to 10-2 in the regular season 2 years ago to a guy that had to take on more of the offensive burden and went from throwing 7 TDs and 9 picks that 2015 campaign to 22 touchdowns and 9 interceptions last year, up the completion percentage from 51 to 59. So I definitely think that he's on the rise as a developing quarterback. And as you were mentioning, not being able to watch a whole lot of Northwestern football or having the desire to, I looked at the schedule. I was thinking, I wonder how many Northwestern games I watched last year. So I picked through a few of them, and I think I pretty much saw the Wisconsin game gun to gun. Of course, the Ohio State game as well. Watched the bowl game against Pitt where they pulled off an upset as well. So Trace McSorley, yes, he's at number 2. So I'm going to be a little less kind than you. I think he just chucks it down the field sometimes. There is a play for quarterbacks in today's game to identify this guy's a great player against an average corner. I'm going to throw a 50-50 ball, and I can do it confidently. Trace McSorley takes that to an extreme, and losing Chris Godwin this year could prove costly if he doesn't possibly factor a little bit more wisdom into his game. And it cost them the Rose Bowl. Possibly it was a tie game, few seconds left. Yes. It was not a good percentage play, because it wasn't like there was a minute left where they could drive it down the field. There was like 18 seconds left, and he's at his own 18-yard line or whatever it was, chucks the ball down the field blindly, and they lose the game.
I forgot about that play.
What's that?
I forgot about that play.
Yeah. It was just,
you're right.
Not just the throw, it was the decision, considering the game circumstance, that made no sense. He does have Deshaun Hamilton coming back, who's been a very productive receiver at Penn State. DeAndre Tompkins provides them a little bit of what Chris Godwin did. He just needs to show that he can do it game in, game out. And like you, JT Barrett's still the best in the business when it comes to Big Ten quarterbacking. And I believe he will prove that this year, coming off what people think was just an atrocious 2016, in which he was tied for the MVP or the Player of the Year in the Big Ten. So enough people out there certainly saw the worth in JT Barrett's game, and he's the all-time record holder in the Big Ten for a reason. Yes, he has talent around him, but I would love to see him get back to what he showed us week in, week out, especially there in 2014. All right, good stuff, Brandon. Enjoy these lists. Top 5 in the Big Ten, if you want to gain a little bit more insight, and we'll leave this as a tease. Also, Brandon's possible breakthrough quarterback in the Big Ten. So we won't mention him, and you'll have to check out his article on the ozone.net. Ohio State Football Talk with Brandon each and every Wednesday night, and we get those videos released as quickly as possible on Mark Rogers TV on YouTube, full conversation on audio on iTunes, and also on Podbean. We'll have the videos available on the ozone.net as well. Brandon, always appreciate the time, man.
All right. Thanks for having me, Mark.